The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the dusty ranch house, and Elena Zimmerman stumbled out with nothing but a worn carpetbag and trembling hands, knowing that this remote Colorado ranch in the summer of 1882 was either her salvation or her final prison. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia after answering an advertisement for household help, leaving behind the suffocating walls of her aunt's home, where she had been little more than an unpaid laborer since her parents died of fever when she was 14. Now at 21, Elena had saved enough coins hidden beneath a loose floorboard to purchase a ticket west toward a new life she could barely imagine. The advertisement had been simple: household help needed for working cattle ranch near Fort Collins, Colorado. Room and board provided. Inquire at Callahan Ranch. The ranch stretched before her like an ocean of golden grass, rolling hills dotted with cattle that looked like dark stones from this distance. Mountains rose in the west, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer heat. The ranch house itself was larger than she had expected, a 2-story structure built from rough-hewn logs with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Outbuildings clustered nearby. A massive barn painted red, several smaller structures she assumed were bunkhouses, and corrals where horses stood swishing their tails against flies. A tall man emerged from the barn, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. He moved with the confident grace of someone who had spent his entire life on horseback, broad-shouldered and lean, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. As he approached, she could make out more details: sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of Colorado sky after a storm. "Miss Zimmerman." His voice was deep and carried easily across the dusty yard. "Yes, sir. I am here about the position." Elena smoothed her travel-stained skirt, acutely aware of how rumpled she must look after 3 weeks of trains and stagecoaches. He removed his hat, revealing those striking eyes more fully. "Rowan Callahan. I own this ranch. Welcome to Colorado." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Elena shook it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but careful. "I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long, Mr. Callahan, but I am grateful to have arrived safely. Come on inside. My housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, passed away 2 months ago. Heart gave out in her sleep. She was with my family for 30 years. Something sad flickered across his face. "Since then, I have been managing alone, and the house shows it. I need someone who can cook, clean, and help manage the household accounts. The work is hard, but I pay fair wages." Elena followed him up the porch steps, noting the dust that had accumulated in the corners, the windows that needed washing. Inside, the house was spacious but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was heavy and practical, the floors scuffed, and dishes were stacked haphazardly in the kitchen visible through an open doorway. "I have 8 ranch hands who work the property," Rowan continued, gesturing around the main room. "They eat in the bunkhouse mostly, but sometimes they come up here for Sunday dinners. There is a garden out back that needs tending and chickens that need feeding. Mrs. Patterson also helped during branding season and when we have cattle drives, cooking for extra hands." "I can do all of that, Mr. Callahan." Elena met his eyes directly, willing him to see her determination. "I have been managing households since I was 14. I can cook for large groups. I keep detailed accounts, and I am not afraid of hard work." Something in his expression softened. "You seem awfully young to have been managing households for 7 years. My parents died of fever in Philadelphia. I went to live with my aunt, who was recently widowed with 5 children. I ran her household until I saved enough to come west." She did not mention how her aunt had worked her from dawn until midnight, How the woman had taken every penny Elena earned from occasional outside work. How she had finally stolen back her own money in the dead of night before fleeing. Rowan studied her face for a long moment, and Elena had the unsettling feeling he could see more than she wanted to reveal. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. There is a washroom at the end of the hall. Take today to settle in and rest from your journey. Tomorrow you can start." "I can start today, sir. I am quite capable of tomorrow," he repeated, but his tone was gentle rather than harsh. "You look exhausted, Miss Zimmerman. There will be plenty of work waiting, I assure you." Elena wanted to protest, wanted to prove immediately that she was worth the wages he would pay, but her body betrayed her with a sudden wave of fatigue. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." He nodded and placed his hat back on his head. "I will have one of the men bring up some water for washing. Supper is at 6. Come down when you are ready." With that, he left through the front door, his boots echoing on the wooden porch. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, running her hand along the smooth banister. Her room was simple but clean. A narrow bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a spotted mirror, a small table with a basin and pitcher. The window looked out over the eastern pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. She set down her carpetbag and sank onto the bed, springs creaking beneath her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her exhaustion. She had done it. She had escaped Philadelphia, escaped her aunt's house, escaped the future that had been closing in around her like a trap. Here, in this vast Colorado landscape, she could breathe. A knock on the door roused her from near sleep. A young ranch hand, barely 18, stood in the hallway with 2 buckets of water. "Mr. Callahan sent me up with these, miss. I am Tommy." He had a scatter of freckles across his nose and red hair that stuck up in all directions. "Thank you, Tommy." Elena took the buckets, surprised by their weight. "We are all real glad you are here, miss. Boss has been trying to manage everything alone and it has been wearing on him. He needs help." Tommy's earnest face broke into a grin. "Also, none of us can cook worth a damn." "Begging your pardon, miss." Despite her fatigue, Elena smiled. "I will do my best to remedy that situation." After Tommy left, she washed away 3 weeks of travel grime, changed into her only other dress, a simple gray cotton that had been mended so many times she had lost count, and attempted to tame her dark hair into a neat bun. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was thinner than she remembered, her brown eyes too large, her cheekbones too prominent. She needed to eat more, but food had been scarce in her aunt's house, reserved first for the children and her aunt's new gentleman caller. At 6 o'clock, Elena descended to find the kitchen empty but a pot of something bubbling on the stove. She lifted the lid to find a watery stew that smelled vaguely of beef and potatoes. Rowan appeared in the doorway, and she quickly replaced the lid, feeling like she had been caught snooping. "That is supposed to be stew," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "I am a better rancher than I am a cook. Would you like me to fix it?" The words were out before she could stop them. "I thought I told you to rest today. I rested. Now I would like to be useful." Elena moved toward the stove with purpose. "If you have any vegetables in the cellar, some flour, perhaps some herbs," Rowan's smile widened. "Help yourself to anything you can find. The cellar door is there." He pointed to a door near the pantry. "I will be in the study doing accounts if you need anything." He left her alone, and Elena set to work with growing enthusiasm. The cellar was well stocked with potatoes, carrots, onions, and preserved vegetables in jars. The pantry held flour, salt, dried herbs, and other staples. Within an hour, she had transformed the watery stew into something rich and savory, made a pan of biscuits, and even found some apples to bake into a simple dessert. When she called Rowan to supper, The look on his face made all her effort worthwhile. He stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at the table she had set, the food she had prepared, and something in his expression made her heart beat faster. "Miss Zimmerman, this looks incredible." "It is just simple fare, Mr. Callahan, nothing fancy." They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, an intimacy Elena had not anticipated. In her aunt's house, she had eaten standing up in the kitchen after everyone else had finished. Here, Rowan served her first, piling her plate high despite her protests. "You need to eat more," he said bluntly. "You are too thin." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I am perfectly healthy, sir. I am not criticizing, I am observing." He took a bite of stew and closed his eyes briefly. "Lord, I had forgotten what real food tastes like. This is outstanding." They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Elena found herself studying him covertly. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 28 or 30. There were fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, and his hands bore the scars and calluses of hard labor. But there was also something refined about him, an education in his speech, a thoughtfulness in his manner. "Have you always lived in Colorado?" she asked, then worried she had been too forward. "Born and raised on this ranch. My father built this house in 1858 before Colorado was even a state. He died 5 years ago, left the place to me." Rowan set down his fork. "It has been just me since then. My mother passed when I was young and I have no siblings. I am sorry for your losses. And I am sorry for yours. Losing your parents at 14 must have been terrible." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. No one had acknowledged her loss in years. Her aunt had told her to be grateful for charity and stop dwelling on the past. "This ranch is a good place," Rowan continued. "Hard work but honest. The land provides if you respect it. I hope you will be happy here, Miss Zimmerman." "I hope so too, Mr. Callahan." After supper, Elena insisted on cleaning up despite Rowan's protests. He finally retreated to his study, and she took her time washing dishes, wiping down counters, learning the layout of the kitchen. This was her domain now, and she intended to master it. That night, she fell asleep to the sound of coyotes calling in the distance, a sound that should have frightened her but instead felt oddly comforting. She was far from everything she had known, but for the first time in years she felt safe. The next morning, Elena woke before dawn, dressed quickly and headed downstairs to start breakfast. She found the kitchen already occupied. Rowan stood at the stove, attempting to make coffee, his hair rumpled from sleep. "Good morning, Mr. Callahan. Please let me do that." He stepped aside gratefully. "I am usually up and working by now, but I wanted to show you the routine before I head out." "That is very considerate but unnecessary. I can figure it out." "I am sure you can, but indulge me anyway." His smile was warm in the lamplight. "I like my coffee strong enough to strip paint, and I usually eat at 5:30 before heading out to work. The hands eat at 6 in the bunkhouse, but Sunday dinners are here at noon. Does that work for you?" "Of course, sir." "And please call me Rowan." "Mr. Callahan makes me feel like my father." Elena hesitated. The informality felt dangerous somehow, too intimate, but she nodded. "Then you should call me Elena." "Elena." He said her name carefully, as if tasting it. "That is a beautiful name." She busied herself with the coffee to hide her blush, and soon had a pot brewing along with bacon sizzling in a pan and eggs ready to fry. They fell into an easy rhythm, Rowan setting the table while she cooked, and Elena found herself relaxing in his presence. Over the next few weeks, she settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn, prepared Rowan's breakfast, cleaned the house, tended the garden, fed the chickens, prepared lunch and dinner, did laundry, mended clothes, and fell into bed exhausted each night. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, but it was different. Here, she was valued. Rowan thanked her for every meal, praised her housekeeping, asked her opinion on household matters. The ranch hands treated her with respectful deference, tipping their hats when they saw her, thanking her profusely on Sundays when she cooked their dinners. Tommy became a particular friend, often staying after meals to help her wash dishes and chat about his dreams of saving enough money to buy his own small ranch someday. But it was Rowan who occupied her thoughts more than she cared to admit. She learned his routines, anticipated his needs, and found herself watching for him to ride in each evening. He was unfailingly kind, but there was a loneliness about him that called to something deep in her own heart. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, and the air between them would grow charged with something she had no name for. One evening in late July, a terrible storm rolled in from the mountains. Elena was preparing dinner when the first crack of thunder shook the house. Rain began to pour and wind howled around the corners of the building. Rowan came in soaked to the bone, water streaming from his hat. "That came on fast," he said, stripping off his wet jacket. "We got most of the herd to shelter, but it is going to be a rough night." Elena hurried to get him towels. "You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." "Yes, Mother," he teased, but his eyes were warm. He disappeared upstairs and returned in dry clothes, his hair still damp and curling slightly. They ate dinner while the storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the windows in brilliant flashes. Elena tried not to flinch at each thunderclap, but she had always been afraid of storms. "Are you all right?" Rowan asked, noticing her white knuckles where she gripped her fork. "I am fine, just a bit nervous in storms." Another tremendous crash of thunder made her jump, and suddenly Rowan was out of his chair and beside her. "It is all right. The house has weathered worse than this." His hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and reassuring. Elena looked up at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. There was concern there, yes, but also something deeper, something that made her heart race faster than the storm ever could. "Elena," he said softly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. The moment stretched between them, fragile and perfect, until another flash of lightning broke the spell. Rowan stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "I should check on the horses. In this storm." "Surely that is too dangerous. They will be frightened. I just need to make sure the barn is secure." He grabbed his still wet jacket and headed for the door. "Then I am coming with you," Elena declared, rising from her chair. "Absolutely not. You will get soaked." "So will you." "If you are determined to be foolish, at least let me help." She grabbed a shawl and wrapped it around her shoulders before he could protest further. The rain hit them like a wall as they ran across the yard to the barn. By the time they tumbled through the barn doors, they were both drenched and laughing breathlessly. Inside, the horses shifted nervously in their stalls, whites showing around their eyes. Rowan moved from stall to stall, speaking in low, soothing tones, checking latches and calming the animals. Elena followed, helping where she could, and gradually the horses settled. The barn smelled of hay and horses and rain, and the storm was a distant roar beyond the walls. "Thank you for helping," Rowan said when they had finished. Water dripped from his hair and his shirt clung to his shoulders. "You did not have to come out here. I wanted to." Elena pushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "I am not just your housekeeper, Rowan. I am part of this ranch now, and I want to help however I can." He looked at her for a long moment, something intense and unguarded in his eyes. "You are more than a housekeeper, Elena. You have brought life back to this place, back to me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elena's heart thundered in her chest, drowning out even the storm. "I am just a servant girl," she whispered, because she needed to say it, needed to acknowledge the gulf between them. Rowan closed the distance between them in 2 strides, and suddenly his hands were cupping her face, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You are the queen of this ranch," he said fiercely. "Do you understand me? You are no servant, not here, not to me." Then his lips were on hers, and Elena forgot about the storm, forgot about everything except the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his arms as they wrapped around her, the rightness of being held by him. She kissed him back with all the longing she had been trying to suppress for weeks, her hands fisting in his wet shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the day you arrived. Tell me I have not completely overstepped. Tell me you feel this too." "I feel it," Elena admitted, her voice shaking. "But Rowan, I have nothing. No family, no money, no prospects. You own this entire ranch. I am your employee. This cannot work." "Why not?" He pulled back to look at her fully. "Who says it cannot work? I do not care about your lack of money or family. I care about you. Your strength, your kindness, the way you hum while you cook, the way you talk to the chickens like they are your friends. I am falling in love with you, Elena Zimmerman, and I think you might be falling in love with me too." Tears sprang to Elena's eyes because he was right. She was falling in love with him, had been falling since that first morning when he had stepped aside to let her make coffee, since every dinner they had shared, every smile, every kindness. "I am terrified," she admitted. "So am I." He kissed her forehead gently. "But I think we should be terrified together. What do you say?" Elena answered by pulling him down for another kiss, this one slower, deeper, full of promise. The storm raged outside, but here in the barn, wrapped in Rowan's arms, she felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. They ran back to the house hand in hand, laughing like children as the rain poured over them. Inside, dripping on the kitchen floor, Rowan pulled her close again. "You should get into dry clothes," he murmured against her hair. "So should you. In a minute. I am not ready to let you go yet." He held her close, and Elena pressed her ear against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Finally, reluctantly, they separated to change. Elena stood in her room, peeling off her wet dress, her mind spinning. Everything had changed in the span of an hour. She was no longer just the housekeeper. She was the woman Rowan Callahan loved. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. When she came back downstairs in a dry dress, her hair wrapped in a towel, she found Rowan in the parlor, building a fire to chase away the damp chill. He had changed into dry clothes and looked rumpled and dear. "Come here," he said, and she went to him without hesitation. They sat together on the sofa, her tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and watched the fire crackle. "Tell me about your life before," Rowan said quietly. "Your parents, what they were like." And Elena did. She told him about her father, who had been a bookkeeper with gentle hands and a love of poetry. About her mother, who had sung while she cooked and always smelled of lavender. About the fever that took them within days of each other, leaving Elena alone at 14. About her aunt's cold house, the endless work, the years of feeling invisible and unwanted. Rowan listened without interrupting, his hand stroking her arm in a comforting rhythm. When she finished, her voice thick with unshed tears, he kissed the top of her head. "You are not invisible anymore. You are not unwanted. I see you, Elena, and I want you here with me." She turned to look up at him. "I want that too, more than I can say." They talked for hours, the storm eventually fading to a gentle rain, the fire burning low. Rowan told her about his childhood on the ranch, about his father's tough love and his mother's quiet strength before she died of pneumonia when he was 8. About the loneliness of running the ranch alone after his father passed, the weight of responsibility, the creeping despair that had been setting in before Elena arrived. "You saved me," he said simply. "I was drowning and did not even realize it until you came along and gave me something to live for besides just keeping the ranch going." "You saved me too," Elena replied. "I was running from a life that was suffocating me. You gave me a home." As the clock struck midnight, Rowan reluctantly rose. "I should let you get some sleep. Morning comes early." Elena stood as well, and he pulled her close for one more kiss, this one tender and sweet. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Rowan." She climbed the stairs to her room, her lips still tingling from his kisses, her heart full to bursting. Everything had changed, and she could not wait to see what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Elena woke with the sun and practically floated down to the kitchen. She made coffee and breakfast with extra care, and when Rowan appeared at 5:30, the look on his face when he saw her made her heart soar. "Good morning," he said, crossing to her immediately and kissing her softly. "I was half afraid I dreamed last night." "It was real," she assured him, rising on her toes to kiss him back. "Very real." They ate breakfast together, stealing glances and secret smiles, the air between them electric with new love. When Rowan prepared to head out to work, he paused at the door. "The hands are going to notice something has changed between us. How do you want to handle that?" Elena considered. "With honesty, I suppose. I do not want to hide this." Rowan's smile was brilliant. "Neither do I. Let them talk. I love you and I do not care who knows it." "I love you too," Elena said, and the words felt like freedom. Over the next few weeks, life on the ranch took on a golden quality. Elena continued her work with renewed energy, but now Rowan often found excuses to come back to the house during the day. They would steal kisses in the kitchen, hold hands on the porch swing in the evening, and talk for hours about their dreams for the future. The ranch hands quickly figured out what was happening, and to Elena's relief, they were universally supportive. Tommy was particularly delighted, telling her that he had never seen the boss so happy. Even the oldest hand, a grizzled cowboy named Jack who rarely spoke, gave her a nod of approval one day and said, "You are good for him, miss. Real good." In late August, Rowan took Elena into Fort Collins for supplies, their first trip to town together. Fort Collins was a bustling frontier town, not quite civilized but no longer wild. They walked down the main street together, Rowan's hand at the small of Elena's back, and she felt prouder than she had ever felt in her life. At the general store, while Rowan discussed feed prices with the owner, the man's wife, a kind-faced woman named Martha, struck up a conversation with Elena. "You are new to these parts, are you not?" "Yes, madam. I have been working at the Callahan ranch since June." Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Working there or living there? Because the way that man looks at you suggests something more than employer and employee." Elena blushed but could not hide her smile. "Perhaps a bit of both. Good for you, dear. Rowan Callahan is one of the finest men in this territory. He deserves someone who makes him happy, and you clearly do." Martha patted her hand. "If you need anything, anything at all, you come find me. We women have to stick together out here." The kindness brought tears to Elena's eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." On the ride back to the ranch, Elena told Rowan about the conversation, and he reached over to squeeze her hand. "Martha is right. I do not deserve you, but I am selfish enough to keep you anyway. You deserve everything good in this world, Rowan Callahan." Elena squeezed his hand back. "And I intend to spend my life proving that to you." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. Then Rowan pulled the horses to a stop at the top of a hill overlooking his ranch. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I know it is fast, probably too fast, but I cannot hold it in any longer." He turned to face her fully. "I love you. I love you with everything I am. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build a family with you, grow old with you, share everything with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. It is not fancy, but it would mean everything to me if you would wear it. Elena Zimmerman, will you marry me?" Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling so hard her face hurt. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Rowan slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, he rested his forehead against hers. "You have made me the happiest man alive. And you have given me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more." They sat on that hilltop for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The ranch spread below them, and Elena realized with a jolt that this was her home now. Not just the house, but the land, the life, the future stretching ahead of them. When they finally returned to the ranch, Rowan immediately gathered all the hands to make an announcement. "Elena has agreed to marry me," he declared, his arm around her waist, his voice ringing with pride. "You are all invited to the wedding, of course. It would not be the same without you." The men erupted in cheers and congratulations. Tommy grabbed Elena in an exuberant hug, spinning her around until she was dizzy. "I knew it. I knew you two were perfect for each other." They set the wedding date for mid-September, giving them just a few weeks to prepare. Elena threw herself into the preparations with Martha's help. The older woman proved to be a treasure trove of knowledge and assistance, helping Elena sew a simple but beautiful white dress, coordinating with the preacher, and spreading word through the community. "Everyone will want to come," Martha assured her. "Rowan is well loved around here, and people are curious about the woman who captured his heart." Elena felt nervous about meeting so many people at once, but Rowan was a steadying presence, always at her side, always making sure she felt comfortable and protected. The day before the wedding, Elena's nerves finally got the better of her. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the cake she had baked, and suddenly felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what was about to happen. Rowan found her there, tears streaming down her face, and immediately pulled her into his arms. "Talk to me. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." "That is the problem." She laughed through her tears. "I am so happy it terrifies me. What if something goes wrong? What if this is all too good to be true? Elena, look at me." He cupped her face in his hands. "This is real. Our love is real. Tomorrow we make it official, but nothing will really change. We will still wake up together, still eat breakfast at this table, still laugh and talk and build a life. The only difference is you will be my wife and I will be your husband. That is all." "That is everything," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, kissing her softly. "It is everything." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the September sky a brilliant blue. Elena dressed with Martha's help, her hands shaking as she fastened the buttons on her simple white dress. The older woman had helped her weave wildflowers into her hair, and when Elena looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked radiant, transformed by love and happiness. The ceremony took place in the garden behind the ranch house, under a bower of late summer flowers that Tommy and the other hands had constructed. Chairs had been set up for the guests, and it seemed like half of Fort Collins had turned out for the event. The preacher, a jovial man with a booming voice, stood ready. But Elena only had eyes for Rowan. He stood waiting for her in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his face shining with love. As she walked toward him through the garden, his eyes never left her face, and she could see his throat working with emotion. When she reached him, he took both her hands in his. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough. The ceremony passed in a blur. Elena heard herself making vows, heard Rowan's strong voice promising to love and cherish her all his days, felt him slip a second ring onto her finger, a wedding band to go with his mother's engagement ring. Then the preacher was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Rowan was kissing her to thunderous applause from their guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mr. and Mrs. Rowan Callahan," the preacher announced, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Martha had organized a feast, and there was music and dancing in the yard. Elena danced with Rowan, with Tommy, with all the ranch hands, and with several of the townspeople who wanted to welcome her to the community. Her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling, but she had never been happier. As the sun set and the party continued, Rowan pulled her aside. "Ready to escape," he murmured in her ear. Elena nodded eagerly, and they slipped away from the celebration, heading into the house hand in hand. They climbed the stairs to Rowan's room, their room now, and he closed the door behind them, shutting out the world. "Hello, wife," he said softly, pulling her close. "Hello, husband," she replied, and then there were no more words, only the sweet discovery of belonging completely to each other. The next morning, Elena woke in Rowan's arms, sunlight streaming through the windows. She lay quietly for a moment, savoring the warmth of his body against hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid reality of this new life. "Good morning, Mrs. Callahan," Rowan murmured, his eyes still closed but a smile playing at his lips. "Good morning." She kissed his shoulder. "Should we get up? There is work to be done." "Let the work wait. I have my wife in my arms, and I am in no hurry to let her go." He pulled her closer, and Elena laughed, letting herself relax into his embrace. They did eventually rise, though much later than usual. Downstairs, they found that Martha and some of the other women from town had cleaned up from the wedding, leaving the kitchen spotless, and a note saying to enjoy their first days as a married couple. Life settled into a new rhythm. Elena continued managing the household, but now as the lady of the house rather than hired help. The difference was subtle but significant. The ranch hands deferred to her in matters of meals and household management, and Rowan consulted her on decisions about the ranch itself. "Your opinion matters to me," he told her when she questioned whether he really wanted her input on whether to buy more cattle. "We are partners in this, Elena. This ranch belongs to both of us now." As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Elena found herself falling even more deeply in love with her life and her husband. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, planning for the future. "I want children," Rowan said one night, his hand resting on her stomach. "I want this house filled with laughter and noise. What do you think?" "I think that sounds perfect," Elena replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I want a family with you, a big, noisy, wonderful family." Winter came to the ranch with the first snow in November. Elena stood at the kitchen window, watching the flakes fall, and marveled at how different her life was from a year ago. Then, she had been trapped in her aunt's cold house in Philadelphia, with no hope and no future. Now, she was the wife of a rancher, the mistress of a thriving ranch, and deeply, completely loved. Christmas that year was magical. Elena decorated the house with pine boughs and holly, and on Christmas morning she gave Rowan a hand-knitted scarf she had been secretly working on for weeks. He gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal, "For writing down your thoughts," he said, "and for recording our life together. Someday our children and grandchildren will want to know our story." Elena ran her fingers over the smooth leather, tears in her eyes. "It is perfect, thank you." They spent a quiet Christmas day together, cooking and eating and making love by the fireplace. It was simple and perfect, and Elena thought she might burst from happiness. In late January, Elena began to feel unwell. At first, she attributed it to a winter ailment, but when the nausea persisted and her monthly courses did not come, she began to suspect the truth. Martha, visiting to check on them during a break in the weather, confirmed her suspicions. "You are with child, dear," the older woman said with a knowing smile. "I would wager you will have a baby by late summer or early fall." Elena could barely contain her excitement. That evening, when Rowan came in from checking on the cattle, she met him at the door with a huge smile. "What has you looking like the cat who got the cream?" he asked, kissing her cold nose. "I have news, wonderful news." She took his hands and placed them on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Rowan just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" He set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Wait, should I not have done that?" "Are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" Elena laughed at his fussing. "I am perfectly fine. The baby is barely the size of a bean right now. You cannot hurt us by hugging me." But Rowan became extremely protective, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy, and take better care of herself. Elena found it both endearing and slightly exasperating, but she loved him for it anyway. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the cold winter months and into spring. As Elena's belly grew, so did Rowan's excitement. He talked to the baby constantly, his hands on her stomach, telling their child about the ranch, about the horses and cattle, about how much they were already loved. In early April, disaster struck. A late-season blizzard swept down from the mountains, catching everyone by surprise. Rowan and the hands worked frantically to get the cattle to shelter, but one of the younger calves was separated from the herd. Rowan went after it, disappearing into the white-out conditions. Elena waited at the house, her anxiety mounting as hours passed with no sign of him. The other hands returned one by one, all reporting that they had lost sight of Rowan in the storm. Tommy stayed with Elena, trying to reassure her, but she could see the worry in his eyes. "He knows this land better than anyone," Tommy said. "He will find his way back." But as night fell and the storm continued to rage, Elena's fear grew. She paced the kitchen, one hand on her swollen belly, praying harder than she had ever prayed in her life. She could not lose him. Not now, not when they had everything to live for. Finally, near midnight, the door burst open and Rowan stumbled in, covered in snow, the lost calf in his arms. Elena ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "You foolish, wonderful man, I was so worried." She helped him set down the calf and then threw her arms around him, not caring that he was soaking wet and freezing. "I am sorry. I could not leave the calf out there to die." His teeth were chattering, and Elena immediately set about getting him out of his wet clothes and wrapped in blankets by the fire. She made him hot coffee and soup, fussing over him until he caught her hand and pulled her down beside him. "I am all right, Elena. It takes more than a little snow to hurt me." "It was not a little snow, it was a blizzard, and you could have died out there." Her voice broke on the last word. Rowan pulled her close, mindful of her belly. "I promise I will be more careful. I have too much to live for now. You and our baby mean everything to me." They sat by the fire for hours, waiting for him to warm up, and Elena sent up silent prayers of gratitude that he had made it home safely. Spring finally arrived in earnest, and the ranch burst into life. New calves were born, the grass turned green, and wildflowers carpeted the hills. Elena's belly grew round and prominent, and she felt the baby moving inside her, strong kicks that made Rowan laugh with delight every time he felt them. "That is my son, showing his strength," he would say proudly. "Or your daughter, showing her spirit," Elena would counter, and they would argue playfully about whether the baby would be a boy or a girl, secretly not caring at all as long as their child was healthy. In late August, Elena went into labor. Martha came to help, along with the doctor from Fort Collins. Rowan was relegated to pacing downstairs with Tommy and the other hands, all of them nervously awaiting news. The labor was long and difficult. Elena had never experienced pain like this, and there were moments when she thought she could not endure another second. But Martha was there, holding her hand, encouraging her, and the thought of Rowan waiting downstairs gave her strength. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, Elena gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy," Martha announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a blanket and placing him in Elena's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Elena looked down at her son through tears of joy and exhaustion. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong features already visible in miniature. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." The doctor finished his work and declared both mother and baby healthy. Then Martha went to fetch Rowan, who took the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into the room, his face anxious, but it transformed into wonder when he saw Elena holding their son. "Come meet your son," Elena said, and Rowan approached almost reverently. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny bundle in Elena's arms. "He is so small. He is perfect." Elena placed the baby in Rowan's arms, and she watched her strong, capable husband transform into someone awed and tender, cradling their child like he was made of spun glass. "What should we name him?" Rowan asked, unable to take his eyes off the baby. They had discussed names endlessly but never decided. Now, looking at her son, Elena knew. "Thomas, after Tommy, who welcomed me so warmly when I first arrived and has been such a good friend to us both. Thomas Callahan." Rowan looked up at her, his eyes wet with tears. "That is perfect." "Tommy will be honored." He leaned over to kiss her softly. "Thank you. Thank you for him, for this life, for everything. I love you so much, Elena." "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." True to Elena's prediction, Tommy was deeply honored when they told him the baby's namesake. The young ranch hand became Thomas's devoted protector, watching over the baby whenever Elena would let him, telling the child stories about the ranch and his parents. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Elena had never known it was possible to love someone as fiercely as she loved her son, except perhaps for how she loved Rowan. Watching her husband with their baby, seeing his tenderness and devotion, made her fall in love with him all over again. Life on the ranch continued, the seasons turning, and the Callahan family thrived. When Thomas was 18 months old, Elena discovered she was pregnant again. Rowan was delighted, and Thomas was too young to understand but would pat his mother's growing belly when prompted. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived on a warm spring day in 1885. She had Elena's delicate features and dark eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "I am in trouble with this one," Rowan declared, gazing at his daughter in wonder. "She's going to break my heart when she grows up and some young man comes calling." "That is many years away," Elena laughed. "Enjoy her being small while you can." The ranch prospered under Rowan's careful management and Elena's efficient household oversight. They expanded the herd, built additional outbuildings, and hired more hands as the operation grew. Elena's days were busy caring for 2 young children. managing the household and helping Rowan with the ranch accounts, but she loved every minute of it. Thomas and Rose grew like weeds, healthy and happy, learning to ride almost before they could walk. The ranch hands doted on both children, and Tommy remained a particular favorite, always willing to give horsey rides or play games. On a warm summer evening in 1887, when Thomas was 4 and Rose was 2, the family sat together on the porch swing. Thomas was telling a rambling story about a frog he had found that day. Rose was falling asleep against her mother's shoulder, and Rowan's arm was around Elena's waist. "You ever think about that first day you arrived?" Rowan asked quietly. "How you climbed off that stagecoach, looking terrified and determined at the same time." Elena smiled at the memory. "I was terrified. I had no idea what I was getting into, coming all the way to Colorado to work for a stranger. Best decision you ever made though, right?" He grinned at her. "The best decision I ever made," she agreed, reaching up to kiss him. "Coming here, meeting you, building this life. It is everything I never knew I wanted. Do you remember what you said that night in the barn during the storm?" Rowan's voice was soft, mindful of the sleeping child in Elena's arms. "You said you were just a servant girl." Elena laughed quietly. "And you told me I was the queen of this ranch." "You are," Rowan said seriously. "You are the queen of this ranch, the love of my life, and the mother of my children. You are everything, Elena." Tears pricked her eyes as they so often did when Rowan said things like this. "And you are my king, my love, my everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors, their children safe in their arms, their future bright with promise. Elena thought back to that frightened girl who had arrived 5 years ago with nothing but a worn carpetbag and desperate hope. She had been looking for work, for survival, for a place to belong. She had found so much more. She had found love, found purpose, found a family and a home. The ranch stretched around them, land they had built together, a legacy they would pass to their children. The mountains rose in the distance, eternal and strong like the love between them. "I am glad you answered my advertisement," Rowan said, as if reading her thoughts. "So am I," Elena replied. "So am I." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. A drought in 1888 tested their resilience, but they weathered it together, Rowan's expertise and Elena's careful management of resources seeing them through. A harsh winter in 1889 took some cattle, but they rebuilt the herd. Through it all, their love remained constant, growing deeper with each passing year. In 1890, Elena gave birth to their third child, another son they named James. Thomas, now 7, was thrilled to have a brother, though 5-year-old Rose was less impressed with the squalling infant who took up so much of her mother's time. But gradually, she warmed to him, and soon she was helping Elena care for the baby with surprising gentleness. The ranch continued to prosper. Rowan's reputation as an honest, fair rancher spread throughout Colorado, and he was often called upon to help settle disputes or advise other ranchers. Elena became known in Fort Collins and the surrounding area as a gracious hostess and a savvy businesswoman. Together, they were a formidable team. Tommy saved enough money to buy his own small ranch about 10 miles from the Callahan property. He married a sweet girl from town named Sarah, and they remained close friends with Rowan and Elena, their children growing up together. Thomas Callahan and Tommy's eldest son became best friends, and it warmed Elena's heart to see the bonds of friendship extending to the next generation. On their 10th wedding anniversary in September 1893, Rowan surprised Elena with a trip to Denver. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch and children for more than a day, and Elena felt both excited and guilty about leaving Thomas, Rose and James with Martha and the ranch hands. "They will be fine," Rowan assured her as they boarded the train. "We deserve a few days to ourselves." Denver was bustling and cosmopolitan, nothing like Fort Collins. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and Rowan bought Elena a beautiful emerald necklace that she protested was too extravagant. "You are worth every penny and more," he insisted, fastening it around her neck. "Besides, it matches your eyes when you are happy." On their last night in Denver, they attended the theater, something Elena had not done since she was a child in Philadelphia with her parents. Sitting in the plush seats, Rowan's hand in hers, watching the actors bring a story to life on stage, she felt the weight of how far she had come. From that desperate girl fleeing her aunt's house to this confident woman, loved and cherished, with a family and a life beyond her wildest dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan whispered during intermission. "About how grateful I am," she replied, "for everything, for you." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "The gratitude is all mine. You saved my life, Elena, in every way that matters." They returned to the ranch refreshed, and even more in love, if that was possible. The children had been well cared for but were ecstatic to have their parents home, clinging to Elena's skirts and chattering about everything that had happened in their absence. Life continued its steady march. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working alongside his father. Rose was spirited and independent, constantly asking questions and getting into mischief. James was gentle and thoughtful, often found with his nose in a book or helping his mother in the garden. In 1896, Elena and Rowan celebrated another addition to their family, a daughter they named Margaret, called Maggie from the start. At 14, 12, 6, and newborn, their children spanned a wide range, but somehow they all fit together like puzzle pieces. Thomas began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, working alongside Rowan and the hands. He was only 14, but already he showed the same natural leadership and ranching instincts as his father. Rowan was proud, and Elena was too, even as she felt a pang at how quickly her eldest was growing up. Rose announced at 12 that she wanted to be a veterinarian, a profession almost unheard of for women, but Elena encouraged her daughter's dreams. "If you want it badly enough, you will find a way," she told Rose. "Never let anyone tell you that you cannot do something because you are a girl." The turn of the century came with celebration and reflection. On New Year's Eve 1899, the Callahan family gathered on the porch despite the cold, watching the stars wheel overhead as they waited for the new century to arrive. "Think about everything that will happen in the next 100 years, Rowan said, his arm around Elena's waist. "All the changes we will see." "I hope some things never change," Elena replied, leaning into him. "I hope our children always know how much they are loved. I hope this ranch continues to thrive, and I hope we have many more years together." "I will drink to that," Rowan said, raising his glass of cider. The children echoed him, even little Maggie holding her own small cup. As the clock struck midnight and the new century began, Rowan pulled Elena close and kissed her, the same sweet, passionate kiss that still made her heart race after 15 years of marriage. The early years of the new century brought changes. Thomas, at 18, began courting a neighbor's daughter, a sensible girl named Mary who impressed both Rowan and Elena with her kindness and practicality. Rose, at 16, was accepted to a veterinary program in Denver, one of only 3 women in the class. James, at 12, showed an interest in art, constantly sketching the landscape and animals around the ranch. And Maggie, at 6, was everyone's darling, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's gentle nature. One spring evening in 1902, as Elena and Rowan sat on the porch after supper, watching the sunset, Rowan turned to her with a serious expression. "I have been thinking about the future," he said. "Thomas is ready to take over more of the ranch operations. He is smart and capable, and he loves this place as much as I do. I want to start teaching him the business side, preparing him to eventually run things." Elena felt a twist in her heart. "Are you saying you want to retire?" "Not retire exactly, but maybe step back a little. Spend more time with the younger children. We have been working so hard for 20 years, Elena. Maybe it is time to let ourselves rest a little, enjoy what we have built." She considered his words carefully. They were both in their early 40s now, still strong and healthy, but she understood what he meant. They had built a thriving ranch and raised wonderful children. Perhaps it was time to let the next generation begin taking the reins. "I think that sounds wonderful," she finally said. "As long as we still get to wake up together every morning, I am happy." "Always," Rowan promised, pulling her close. "Until my last breath, you will be the first thing I see each morning and the last thing I see each night." Thomas married Mary in the summer of 1903, a beautiful ceremony held at the ranch, much like his parents' wedding 20 years earlier. Watching her son pledge his life to his bride, Elena felt tears stream down her face, remembering her own wedding day, how young and scared and hopeful she had been. "Our boy is all grown up," Rowan whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. "They will be happy," Elena replied, squeezing his hand. "Just like us." Thomas and Mary built a house on the far side of the ranch property, close enough to help with operations but far enough for their own privacy. The following year, they welcomed Rowan and Elena's first grandchild, a boy they named Rowan after his grandfather. Elena held her grandson and felt the circle of life completing itself, this new generation carrying forward the legacy they had built. Rose graduated from her veterinary program in 1905, one of the first female veterinarians in Colorado. She returned to Fort Collins and opened her own practice, treating both livestock and household pets. She remained unmarried, focused on her career, and Elena supported her completely, proud of her daughter's groundbreaking achievements. James, at 17, announced his intention to attend art school in Chicago. This was harder for Elena to accept, the thought of her gentle son so far from home, but she knew she had to let him follow his dreams as she had encouraged Rose to do. "He will be fine," Rowan assured her the night before James left for Chicago. "He is stronger than he seems, our James." "And he will always come home," Elena nodded, wiping away tears. "I know it is just hard to let them go. That is the job of parents. Raise them right, then let them fly." He held her close. "We have done well, Elena. All our children are happy, healthy, pursuing their dreams. We should be proud." "I am proud and grateful." She looked up at her husband, noting the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes deepened by 23 years of laughter and sun. He was still the handsomest man she had ever seen, still made her heart race with a look. "I am grateful for every day with you." Maggie, now 11, was the only child left at home full-time, and she reveled in having her parents' attention. She was bright and curious, spending hours helping her mother in the garden and her father with the horses. She announced that she wanted to be a rancher just like her father, and Rowan beamed with pride. The years continued to pass in a gentle rhythm. Thomas and Mary had 3 more children, giving Rowan and Elena more grandchildren to dote on. Rose remained dedicated to her practice, but seemed content with her choices. James sent regular letters from Chicago, his artwork improving dramatically, and eventually secured a position teaching at the art school where he had studied. Maggie grew into a capable young woman, taking on more responsibility around the ranch. In the summer of 1912, the entire family gathered for Rowan and Elena's 27th wedding anniversary. All their children came home, bringing grandchildren and, in Rose's case, a new gentleman friend she was courting. The house was full of noise and laughter, exactly as Elena had always dreamed it would be. At the anniversary dinner, Thomas stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the crowded table. "You built more than just a successful ranch. You built a family, a legacy of love and hard work and integrity. Everything I know about being a good man I learned from watching you, Dad. Everything I know about strength and grace I learned from you, Mom. Thank you for everything you have given us." There were tears around the table as everyone raised their glasses. Rowan looked at Elena, and she saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes. Pride, love, gratitude for this beautiful life they had created together. Later, after the guests had retired and the house had finally quieted, Rowan and Elena sat on the porch swing, the same spot where they had shared so many conversations over the years. "Remember that first night after the storm?" Rowan asked. "When I told you that you were the queen of this ranch?" "I remember everything," Elena replied softly. "Every moment, every word, every kiss. I meant it then, and I mean it now." He took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding band, worn smooth by nearly 3 decades of wear. "You are still my queen, you always will be. And you are still my king, my love, my everything." She leaned against his shoulder, fitting into his side as perfectly as she always had. "I could not have imagined this life when I stepped off that stagecoach 30 years ago. I was just looking for work, for a place to survive. Instead, you found a place to thrive. We both did." Rowan kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Elena Callahan. I have loved you from the moment you took over my kitchen and fixed that terrible stew." Elena laughed, the sound as bright and joyful as it had been when she was 21. "And I have loved you from the moment you told me I deserved to rest, that first day. You saw me, truly saw me, and you made me feel valued." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The ranch stretched around them, generations of their family now tied to this land. The cattle lowed in the distance, horses whinnied softly in the barn, and somewhere an owl hooted its evening song. This was home. This was love. This was the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, through storms and sunshine, challenges and triumphs. From servant girl and lonely rancher to queen and king of their own kingdom, they had created something beautiful and lasting. "Thank you for answering my advertisement," Rowan said again, as he had said so many times over the years. "Thank you for seeing past the servant girl to the woman I could become," Elena replied, as she always did. He pulled her closer, and they sat wrapped in each other's arms under the vast Colorado sky, exactly where they belonged, together until the end of their days and beyond. Their love a legacy that would endure for generations to come.